Well, let's dive in. Hey, would you mind introducing yourself to begin?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. So, hey everyone, I'm Megan Hostetler. I'm a product marketing director at Emarsys. Been in the marketing technology space for a little over a decade now, but I was started off at Exact Target, got acquired by Salesforce, was there for about 7 years, had a short stint at a startup a little outside of MarTech called Lessonly, and then came back because I do love this space. I love all things MarTech. So I came back to SAP and I support and I sit on the customer experience team and I support the Emarsys customer engagement solution. But been here for about a little over 2.5 years now. But I'm based in Indianapolis and happy to be chatting with you.
Nice. I'm really, really happy to have you here. For anybody who's watching this who doesn't know me, I'm Drew Messenger Michaels. I'm the head of go-to-market at Base One. Before that, I spent around a decade at SAP, depending on how you count, I guess, because I was at Hybris before SAP acquired them. And so I've been doing a lot of work in the commerce and eventually marketing and other sorts of related spaces as well. And in my current role, I do a lot of work with Emarsys. Actually, funny enough, way more than I did when I was at SAP. Life's a funny old thing.
Yeah.
Um, but
Love
but
life's
yeah,
a whole bunch of acquisitions, hybrid.
like
Emarsys,
yeah.
got acquired in November 2020, I believe,
Hmm.
with SAP. So yeah,
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah,
feels like
yeah.
yesterday, but yeah, it's
Does
been a
feel like
while
yesterday. Well,
now.
there have been some things going on in the world that make time difficult to track, I think, in the
Yes,
last couple of
yes,
years. One or two. I'm really, really happy that you're here. And I think what we want to talk about today is the unique place that Emarsys occupies in the MarTech space and how that affects which kinds of customers are looking at it, which kinds of tech stacks one might currently have that lead you to, to say like, hey, let's give Emarsys a look. Obviously, there are sort of greenfield customers. There are bigger companies than you might expect who don't have a MarTech solution. You would think that would be impossible at this phase. You and I both know that is not impossible. But there's also, of course, always a situation where they're bought into one stack and then they begin to look at a Emarsys, perhaps instead of, but certainly in addition to what they've got. So, I mean, maybe the place to begin is could you talk a little bit about what makes Emarsys unique in the market, or maybe even further back than that? What is Emarsys?
yeah. What is this? Yeah, yeah. No,
What are we talking about? Yeah.
what is this part? Yeah, no, happy to share a little bit about Emarsys. So we are an omni-channel customer engagement platform. We coin ourselves on bringing power to the marketer. So the whole idea here is we are purpose built for marketers with the ultimate goal to deliver personalized omni-channel experiences. So we help you to build and launch and measure your automated marketing campaigns, whether that's through your emails, your SMS, your push notifications, your website, your ads, whatever channel you are looking to engage your customer on, you can use Emarsys to help coordinate and orchestrate those campaigns and those engagements that you're looking to have with your customer. And like you said, like there are some brands out there that are just now going through a digital transformation, and there are some who've been around forever and have been going direct to consumer for years and years and years. So I think what we see is customers from all really across the board, and a lot of it depends on the industry you're in. Obviously, if you're more of a consumer products brand, you're going to be thinking about it a little bit differently as you're maybe pivoting to direct to consumer, which is like newer and building new teams and maybe just
Sure.
rethinking
Yeah.
how they think about it. Like, some of the customers that we have been starting to work with are just now building that B2B2C strategy. But our bread and butter really started with retail and e-commerce, and we've moved into sports and entertainment, travel and hospitality, consumer products, just anyone who is trying to engage um, their consumers in any way, shape, or form to drive that conversion and create lifelong loyal customers.
Nice. Sometimes when I talk to businesses that aren't familiar with Emarsys about it, what I say is it is a marketing platform built with the marketer in mind. And that sounds sort of standard table stakes, but it's rarer than you might expect for a couple of reasons, right? One is that Emarsys has grown pretty organically. Obviously, product like we were talking about, acquisitions happen, right? Like companies like get put together in ways that are unexpected. But most of the feature set of Emarsys has really just been built sort of in-house over the years. So it's a bit more end-to-end than I think competing products. From my point of view as an SI, you don't have to comment on that if that's too spicy a take. But like from our point of view, it really is like sort of one-stop shopping something for stuff like CDP like functionality, or for or rather, and for orchestration, execution of campaigns, a bunch of different channels, all of that stuff sort of managed centrally. And that is different than other platforms, which are in many ways otherwise sort of equally full featured.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that we're seeing, and especially as we started to get more integrated with SAP after the acquisition too, we have direct integrations with Commerce Cloud, with our CDP solutions at SAP, but we also know that people have other tech out there that's not us. Like
Totally.
we get it. So yeah, a big differentiator for us is that we are agnostic of wherever your data is coming from. So for example, just to go back to consumer products as an example, we have a customer, Gibson. So if you're any guitar players out there, they were a big flagship customer of ours that, they just moved to direct to consumer right around the pandemic, actually, when everyone was like, yeah, I might spend some time playing a guitar, but you can't go into the store to
Right.
play, like wild concept. So they had to kind of like forced to go online. And so when they started the process, they were like, okay, we have 16 data sources from all these different places, which is actually potentially lower than some that we've worked with
I
before.
was going to
Like,
say that's not unheard of by any stretch.
not
Yeah, yeah,
unheard
yeah.
of, but it feels like a lot to someone who's like moving direct to
Mhm.
consumer. And so a big thing that they were, delighted and surprised, I guess, about was they didn't have to have a ton of interaction with their IT team. So they have that initial onboarding of the data. They work with the IT team up front, building those relationships, which maybe wasn't as common for them before. But then they were able to, if they want to add a channel, if they want to add a new campaign, they didn't have to rely on that IT team all the time, which in some cases with these big complex customer engagement or marketing cloud platforms, it can be a bit robust and a little overwhelming for someone who's just trying to get an email out the door, just trying to do like a simple campaign and try new things with their
Mhm.
automations. But
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And you make such an important point, which is that I said there were two things. The first thing is Emarsys is very end to end in the functionality it offers. But the second important thing, and the reason that we work with it a lot as an SI, or one of the important reasons, which is maybe a little bit less unique, but equally important, is that it plays nice with others, right? Like you say, it's pretty agnostic as far as those data sources, both incoming and outgoing. So if you've got a CDP that you like, you can stick with it, right? The fact that Emarsys has CDP-like functionality does not mean that Emarsys has to be your CDP if you're going to use it. It's got an opinionated data structure, but as you say, it doesn't sort of fundamentally care where those data come from. So
Mhm.
it's extremely flexible in that sense. And we found that to be a really useful thing as we're scoping out projects. I think sometimes people get scared about the idea of like, hey, we're invested in technology X, so we're stuck, right? But you
Mhm.
aren't necessarily, right? There are often really good ways to get that kind of like functionality you're excited about in Emarsys, for example, without necessarily redoing your entire infrastructure, right? Which is not to say you shouldn't think about ways to increase efficiency, simplify, et cetera, but you don't have to do all of that at once.
Yeah. Yeah, and we get a lot of questions from people who like, maybe they're in the middle of their transformation and they're like, "Am I ready for a CDP? Am I not?" So we
Mm-hmm,
tend to say
mm-hmm.
like, ask yourself questions like, "What data do I not have today that I would need to have? And if so, what
Yeah.
purpose is that data going to do for my business? Like, it has to serve a purpose. You can kind of create and build the right processes using the functionality you may already have and then work your way up to something more robust like a CDP. And then like I said, when you do have that CDP in place, works nicely together with the Emarsys platform to be able to take action on that data. I think that's a key thing. Like sometimes they're like people are thinking, I have so much data, I don't even know what to do with it. So it's not really the amount of data that's the problem. It's like how do I make that data actionable? And I think that's where we come into play.
Let's talk about a concrete example then. I mean, one of the CDP products that we've seen out in the wild, right, that people are using and are in many cases really happy with is Adobe's CDP offering. Now, Adobe, of course, has their own stack of MarTech, right, of marketing technologies. But it's in an interesting place. I don't know if maybe because I've been out there, I have a little more of the details under my belt than you.
Yeah,
We
you
can get
probably
as
have a
into
little
it as you
bit more
want.
in the
Okay,
loop than me.
a
Yeah.
little bit of context. So without getting into the minutia of like individual versions and like desktop versus web applications and all that stuff, the big story is Adobe is sunsetting a product that a lot of people use, which is called Adobe Campaign Standard. If you are on Adobe Campaign Standard, you therefore have to go somewhere else. There are several options in-house. One is an older product called Adobe Campaign Classic, which is quite full-featured, but outside of the new cloud infrastructure. Another is Adobe Journey Optimizer, which is newer and in the cloud infrastructure, but because it's newer, a little bit less full-featured. So do you need to run both? How do you decide? All of these customers who are really happy with their Adobe CDP and are used to their Adobe MarTech are, because of this situation, looking around. As we know, we talked about acquisitions earlier. Just because two things are owned by the same company doesn't mean they sort of automatically integrate. So if you are using both Adobe Campaign Classic and Adobe Journey Optimizer, or even just an Adobe CDP and Adobe Journey Optimizer, you've got to go through sort of a data migration exercise, or at least think about the degree to which you have to go through one, in the same way you would if you were looking at a new marketing solution. So this has, we've seen in the market, given us a really interesting opportunity to talk apples to apples about what the Adobe Marketing Suite offers versus what Emarsys offers, and maybe just as importantly, how the two companies have approached the problem differently. Again, Emarsys is very sort of end-to-end and unified, whereas Adobe sort of offers a whole bunch of different solutions, which are all great in their own right, but are not necessarily connected, right? And unless you decide how to connect them. So this is like, again, these are just two different ways of approaching things, and it doesn't have to be fully either or in our experience. Again, if you're happy with your Adobe CDP, plugging that into Emarsys, in our experience, can sort of give you the best of all possible worlds, right? Can give you I bet the way to say it is, it can give you the most of both products, right?
Yeah.
If you've got that information in your CDP, but then you want to put it into action, as you're saying, in Emarsys in a sort of real-time way, have everything past that point be end-to-end, take advantage of some of the, like, to get into the weeds a little, smart insights or, dynamic profiling stuff that Emarsys can offer, that can absolutely begin with an Adobe CDP. And I think we've found that kind of, like, as you say, that blended approach popping up more and more, at least as something people are considering, rather than being all in on a single tech stack, which again, you can also do. But I think it's been very interesting to see what that blended approach can look like and the possibilities it unlocks.
Like just with the campaign, are there campaign optimizer or these journey optimizer? Is that multi-channel that I touched on a lot of like, we have so many
Mm-hmm.
channel adoption. Like, is there anything you know about that product that is worth mentioning from like a channel
Yeah. I
perspective?
think one of the reasons you might keep Campaign Classic in the mix, even if you were going for Journey Optimizer, which again is like in the latter, Journey Optimizer is in the cloud. I've learned, by the way, some people can't grok when you say the former and the latter. I do that a lot because I'm a nerd. I'm going to try not to do that. Okay. So one of the reasons you might keep Campaign Classic in the mix, even if you've got Journey Optimizer, which is in the cloud and all of that, is that multi-channel thing. You can't necessarily manage all of your channels simultaneously and, I guess, comprehensively from the new product. So that's again something that I think people who are used to marketing platforms other than Emarsys, not just Adobe stuff, are surprised about in Emarsys. Is just sort of how unified things are. I think I will bring up just, a straight up Emarsys sandbox and people will assume I'm doing some kind of sales demo magic where I've like pre-configured a bunch of things and what have you. And it's like, no, this is just sort of how it looks from day one, and it's,
Mhm.
we're totally clear about how, like, you do need a third party provider for SMS and whatever, right? Not that it's magic, not that everything works right out of the box, but I think it is a lot more connected as far as doing multi-channel journeys. When you bring up, again, to get slightly Emarsys nerdy, you bring up an automation program that is multi-channel that may hit, email and SMS and web push and all of that. I think that does kind of blow people's minds because that is something that takes a fair bit of configuration and possibly multiple systems to really get working in sort of other tech stacks or other paradigms. That is maybe something that, if it's not unique about Emarsys, it's certainly something notable about Emarsys. It's a differentiator for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting and it's not something that's like, a new phenomenon. Like this kind of stuff happens. So I think it's a good
Right.
opportunity for people to reflect and see, am I getting the data that I want? Am I getting the insights that I want? But am I getting it in a way that's actionable and that I can use quickly? So I think like as if customers are going through this and they're trying to figure out the best approach to it, I would just advise to try to think through, am I getting campaigns up and running quick enough? Because that's
Hmm.
something
Hmm.
that I know that we kind of hang our hat on. I know I work for Emarsys, so I'm gonna like shout across the rooftops, obviously. But that's where
You don't have
you
to be
you gut check me. We're
the
balancing
opinion.
each other.
The opinion doesn't have to be unbiased to be useful. That's
Yeah.
the whole thing, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think so. From my perspective, is if I can get a campaign out the door in a few weeks versus a few months, that's huge. So we have tons
Totally,
of
totally.
examples of just for example, we had a customer, Rezo. They're based in Latam. They're a retailer. They have a headquarters in Brazil, and
Hmm.
they were a little hesitant to make a shift to us, and they were wanted to make sure they were ready by holiday. Obviously, as a retailer, holiday is huge, so they wanted to make sure everything was up and running. So they got up and running well, way before holiday, and they were one thing that they were excited about with Emarsys was they were surprised and delighted by how fast not only they got implemented, but how fast they could see results even before the holiday season. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't hesitate just because you're concerned about impacting a big future campaign like high peak season around November or the holidays.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Emarsys, I think, I can confirm this for sure as an SI. If you're looking for a gut check, it stands up much more quickly than a lot of other tech, coming from a world of softwares that are a lot less cloud native, I suppose. Emarsys, it blows my mind sometimes, like how quick we can get going. So I think you're right that that shouldn't necessarily be a barrier. And I guess the thing I'm trying to emphasize by bringing up the Adobe example is you shouldn't necessarily be intimidated by complex integration scenarios either. In the same way that Emarsys is built to get stood up quickly, it is also built precisely for those kinds of scenarios where there are multiple data sources and multiple systems in play. It's built with that stuff in mind too. I think we can very much, get into an all-in headspace, right? You commit to a stack or whatever. And again, I think it's just interesting to like think about other possibilities, right? Actually, to your point, look at the functionality. What do you need to be doing that either isn't efficient today or you straight up can't do? What does it take to get there, right? Sometimes looking at an additional tool is the way to get there, right? And to evaluate it with your stakeholders, with the marketers who are actually going to be doing the work, and asking them, does this make your life easier? Often it does.
And I think getting the buy-in across, you had mentioned stakeholders, so like getting that buy-in up front. So if you are evaluating, bring in your IT team, bring in any of your like the back office teams that are the unsung heroes, like your returns data, like who is owning that at your company. If you can take
Mm-hmm.
your ERP data and understand how your customers are returning the products, like, again, back to holiday, you know,
Totally, totally.
increased return rate usually. So how can you combat that and make sure you truly have an understanding of who your high value customers are, not the like frequent returners all the time, and maybe not give them a voucher as often as you maybe would someone who's a bit more high value, bigger carts, things like that. So yeah, bring in people from across the company when you're thinking about it, because there may be areas that you may not be thinking about that the customer engagement data could help influence through our open data ecosystem.
That open data ecosystem to me is key because I think people may not know, there are multiple ways you can sort of access data in Emarsys. You can bring stuff in just as a batch job if you've got existing, certainly contacts, but even segments, right? If you've got just like a list of contacts that you want to use for stuff, that's the beginning of distribution. Maybe you put other intelligence on there, but that's your starting point. You can just bring that stuff in and Emarsys can respect those and start using them day one. You also, of course, have dynamic stuff within Emarsys where it can, again, read the contact record and say, like, if this person hasn't purchased in the last 30 days or if they've returned 5 times in the last 3 months or whatever, you can use that to further profile. And then there's relational data, right? So without even necessarily bringing data into the Emarsys system per se, you can refer to outside databases and use that stuff for decisioning, profiling, et cetera. It's like remarkably flexible in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the biggest like learning for me when I came over to Emarsys was that relational data and that model that we have is the reason why it's so flexible and accessible for you to add channels and add campaigns. Like Forrester has named us the highest, or like we're 40% higher of a channel adoption than other
Mm.
vendors. And I think a lot of it is because it's easier to adopt the channel because there's less friction, I guess, to have that adoption, which I think is huge, especially when you're trying to compete with all of these consumers like you and me who we're all over the place. We are everywhere
Sure,
all the
sure.
time. So many options everywhere. So being able to add channels, but not just to add a channel to add it, but to add it with purpose and add it quickly and understand if it's working for you or not. You may add it and think, actually, that's not worth our while, but hey, you tested it and you saw either quick results or not, and then you can move on to a different one. So I think that gives marketing teams flexibility to try new things and innovate and not feel like you were saying earlier, like stuck in one spot.
Yeah, absolutely. There, so like you said consumers like you and me, and like I think about this a lot. When I am trying a new brand out, I start from a point of view of zero loyalty, right? Like I'm going to give it a go, and they have to sort of earn my loyalty, like through the product being good or the service, of course, but also through like communication that's useful. Like a returns process where I know what each step looks like if I need to return something. Not that I'm returning, 5 times every month or
Yeah,
whatever.
we're not
I think
those
you pointed.
people.
No, we're certainly not, certainly not. But like you said, like we got used to during lockdown, ordering clothes online and being like, if it doesn't fit, I'll send it back, whatever, because there's no storeroom to go into, and a fair few brands have sort of embraced that, right, and like made sure that that's an easy process. So I guess my question is, how do you win loyalty, right? Are there like best practices that cross over verticals? Is it entirely vertical specific? Like, what do you think is the right question to ask, at least if you're a business that's trying to figure out, how do I make customers loyal in an environment where they have functionally infinite options?
Yeah. I mean, that's a bold, I could take that any way you want, but I for us, when it comes to loyalty, we do a loyalty index every year where we survey consumers across the globe and we see what are consumers saying, and then we give that information back to our customers just so they know what consumers are talking about. So that research is going to come out in September for 2024. But I can tell you from the past, what we were finding is definitely coupons are things that are going to always be the incentive, but the thing that actually is rising above is what we call true loyalty. So
Mm.
like, I don't even think it's us that categorizes these terms, but there are 5 different terms, I believe, of loyalty. There's true loyalty, like incentivized loyalty. I'm blanking on the other ones, but true loyalty is something that we have found in this research to rise a bit above, and that is due to platforms like Emarsys, for example, that take into consider that holistic experience. So I would ask, if I was a marketer thinking about loyalty, I would ask, am I just doing loyalty in my email program or just in one lane of the entire customer experience, or am I actually thinking about loyalty throughout the entire customer life cycle? So something that we do with our clients is we literally map out the customer journey. So where does it start from that initial acquisition to retention and beyond? And then we have them map out what data they're collecting across that entire journey and maybe what they're not. And that's kind of what I was
Mm.
saying earlier of understanding where you do and don't have information about your customer that could influence those specific areas. And they're not going to tackle every single phase of the customer journey all at once. I will preface that, but you have to, what is going to make the most impact right now? And so I know that's a long-winded question, but think about the
I asked you a huge
holistic,
question. You did admirably.
holistic
Yeah.
journey. Yeah, is what I would say is something to map out. But sometimes we would go through this exercise, like we do these workshops where we have a little workbook and they walk through it and everything. But sometimes they're like, oh, I think we're just like not, either they don't have the information for it or they don't have the right team or like team structure set up for a certain area of the customer life cycle. And like even those conversations to start it might not even be a technology problem right now. It's just like your team structure. And then you can think about the technology to help support.
Those 5 kinds of loyalty, I think, is actually a really interesting thing. The true loyalty you were talking about
Yeah.
is sort of the end goal, right? Like someone who's not going to switch brands basically for any reason.
Yes.
And those four other categories are sort of ways of getting there.
Mhm.
Incentivized loyalty, you mentioned, that's, offering coupons and special offers and things like that. There's like inherited loyalty, which is
Yeah.
loyalty by association. Just I prefer local businesses, I prefer outlets, that kind of thing. There's silent loyalty, which I probably am quite guilty of this, which is like shopping at the same place every time, but not advocating in any way, not saying,
Yeah.
hey, I just got this cool new shirt
Yeah, I'm
from
not gonna
brand
tell
X.
anybody. It's too cool. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't want other people to know, or it won't be cool.
Yeah.
It isn't even that. It's just like like laziness, perhaps. I don't know, or it not being my job to advertise if I'm not given a reason to. Right? Like
Mhm.
it's an interesting thing. It's different people think about it different ways. And then fourth, but not least, would be ethical loyalty. Right? So like I appreciate that this company has an environmental commitment. I appreciate that they treat their employees well. That kind of thing.
Mhm.
And this, that can of course be genuine, or it can be greenwashing or whatever. We strive to make it genuine, because if you're trying to get to true loyalty, over a long period of time, probably you want to actually be doing the things people think you're doing, because
Yeah.
they'll notice, right? Yeah.
And it's different in every region. What's I find interesting. So for I think it was Australia, they had
Mm.
really high coupon rates or the incentivized loyalty, and they relied
Hmm.
these incentives through vouchers, coupons, and stuff, which is like was a lot more than some of the other regions, and maybe because it's smaller, maybe, or maybe there's not as much competition. I don't know, but that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
interesting to me too. It's just different in every region.
So, hey, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I think this was like really, helpful and enlightening for me, and I hope you feel the same. And I hope people watching enjoy it. Let us know what you think. We can do more things like this if this is the sort of thing you would like to see more of. So, get in touch if you have questions. And thank you, Megan, again for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, we're here to support, even if it's like I said, strategy or just talking about how you can even think through it. We're more than happy to help. So you now have
Amazing.
a new friend at Emarsys. So
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.